Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Ryan Leone's Patreon channel. And for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Ryan's father, Frank Leone, and well known for my Frank Fridays that I've done on Patreon and Ryan's YouTube channel in the past. In any event, a few weeks ago, filmed a session basically responding to questions that Patreon subscribers had asked Karina to ask me. And that apparently went very well. Karina reports that quite a number of people have had positive comments about it. We can only do so many more of those because there's only so many questions that we can ask. So Karina and I thought it would be a lot of fun and a good idea for me to have a series of interviews with Ryan's. People that were with Ryan when he went through all the various stages of his life and get some insights from them, maybe some good stories from them. So that's what we're planning to do, both live here in Santa Barbara as we are doing today, as well as going down the road, some Zoom calls, some Zoom interviews with other people around the country or even outside the country that also have interesting information to share about Ryan. That said, our guest speaker today, or our guest interviewee today, is Geoff DeRose. Geoff will tell you how he knows Ryan in a second, but he was very close friends with Ryan for many years and was had a front row seat for a lot of the more amazing stories that came down the turnpike during those years. So Geoff, do you want to share a few words about how you first met Ryan? Where did you meet him? What was going on?
Yeah, so I first met Ryan in high school, and I can't really recall how I met him, but I remember our first interaction was I was trying to make some money so I could buy some weed, and I came up with the idea to sell fake acid. So I licked some sweet tarts, put them in some foil, and I told Ryan that I had some. And so we made the interaction, and I sold it to him. And that's my first time meeting Ryan, really. I mean, he clearly found out. He confronted me. I remember he got in my face and I punched him in the stomach, and
and a beautiful friendship began.
Yeah, and then a beautiful friendship happened from that. Yeah.
Well, that was very interesting. What was Ryan like in those days? I mean, this is presumably about ninth grade. You were both at Santa Barbara High. How would you describe the ninth grade version of Ryan?
I mean, honestly, the ninth grade version was not much different than what he became later. He just wasn't into the hard drugs at that point. He was always by himself, always like scheming on girls and skateboarding. That was pretty much what Ryan was up to.
Scheming on girls?
Yeah, he was.
What does that mean? That's above my head.
He was just always going after girls, and he was by himself so that he didn't get cock blocked by all the dudes. That's basically what Ryan was up to.
Question I'd like to ask, and you could probably talk for hours on this, and we're trying to keep the whole presentation down to 30 minutes, but I want to ask you about some of your more interesting Ryan stories. But one that I particularly want to start off with was the tumultuous month of November 2017. And let me set the stage on this and tell you what I saw as a father, as a parent. But you were living with him during most of that month, that period of time, and you have insights that I don't know anything about. So I think between the two of us, we can tell the story pretty well. But in November of 2017, Ryan really hit a very strange place in his life. He was doing well. He was with Karina at that point. Was Nico born yet?
No.
Nico was not born yet. Okay.
She was pregnant at that point.
She was pregnant, but Nico was not born yet. Okay.
Yeah.
And my read on things was that Ryan had sunk himself too deep into trying to do too many different things. He had a fundraiser at a local theater. He was trying to write a couple of different books. He was working on his documentary. He was trying to be an advocate for prison reform. He was just doing a lot of things, and I think he really wore himself down. But he basically went into a period of psychosis, which I never even knew about until that period of time when I finally found out that what was happening. But I remember the Saturday afternoon before Thanksgiving of that November, Karina, Ryan, and I went down to see a Los Angeles Kings hockey game in LA, and Ryan's behavior was just totally different than it had been a couple days before. And so I didn't know what was going on, And I remember on the way back, and it's a good 2-hour drive from what was then Staples Center back to Santa Barbara, and he was in the back seat talking to his very good friend Nick Stahl, the actor, and Karina and I were in the front. And the thing that I remember most is for 2 hours, Ryan did not stop talking. I don't think Nick said a word for 2 hours. It was like Ryan was just hyped up and talking for 2 hours. So I knew something strange was going on. We went into the following week, and it was Thanksgiving, so we drove up north, 4 hours north, to be with one of Ryan's aunts and her family to celebrate Thanksgiving. And Ryan basically had a psychotic breakdown of some sort on the way back, got out of the car and ran somewhere, and we had to wait for him and try to contact him on his cell phone and tell him to come back. We have a 4-hour drive to get back to Santa Barbara. So we knew things were really strange then. And by back to Santa Barbara, it meant back to Geoff's place, because Ryan and Karina were staying with you at that point.
Right.
And then, if you remember, shortly thereafter, 2 nights later, Saturday, we knew something was really wrong. So Max Brutes, who we were hoping to have on following you, him and what became his wife, and Karina and myself and my wife Diane, the 5 of us, probably spent about 4 hours on a Saturday evening from about 5 to 9 trying to figure out what we were going to do about, we were afraid that Ryan was just going to die if we left him out on the streets. And there was some program where you can call the police department, and we called the police department and sort of alerted them to track him down, and somehow, and you'll have to explain this, they tracked down him and you at Lazy Acres Market about 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. So we have no idea what that was about. But all this continued and just got worse and worse and worse over the next week. And on, I think it was probably Wednesday morning, the doorbell rings about 5 in the morning, our doorbell, and there's Ryan there, and they say, "Ryan, what are you doing here at 5 in the morning?" And he says, I'm leaving. I'm going to Mexico. I need $10. Well, first of all, you're not going to get very far with $10 to get to Mexico. But I said, no, I'm not going to give you money. I mean, you're not doing well right now. Not going to give you money. And I said, and he just sort of disappeared. And then I immediately went over to your place, and you and Karina were there, and we tried to intervene again. And finally, to end the whole story, that Friday, I had taken all of Ryan's meds because from your place, because there was stuff there that he could, instead of one, he could have taken 100, and Ryan, he liked things in excess.
Right, more is better.
More is better, right? So I had that, and he came by with these 2 big guys and rang the doorbell. He says, "I'm here with my security detail, and I want my drugs back." And I said, "I'm not going to give it." He said, "Well, I'm not leaving." So there was a warrant out for his address at the time, for his arrest at the time, and I called the police and I said, I have your man, and they came by a short time later. And
he called them too.
Yeah, I think he did call them.
He called them on you.
Yeah, he called them on me because I wouldn't give him his meds back, right? And actually, that was December 1st of 2017, and they had a warrant for him, and our feeling was he was going to be a lot safer in jail than he would be on the street. The street, it was like frightening. So yeah, having said all that, what was really going on? What did I miss as a parent?
I mean, to kind of recap, like, what leading up to that, it was a slow trajectory into madness, is from what I experienced. He went from being homeless, living in abandoned houses with Karina, to almost overnight getting a film deal to start a television show. And so he's filming with actual professional filmers down in LA. All of a sudden they start to recognize that he has a little bit behind him. He has the book, he has the screenplay that he's adapted of his book, and basically they all of a sudden want to do a documentary on him. And it seemed like overnight, all of a sudden, he has an entourage of film people coming by, and they start basically funding his life at that point. Because at that point, I mean, he was trying to win it big off second chance, like lottery, like the little scratchers.
Good luck.
that was his goal at the time. He was like, if I could just collect them out of the trash can, I could eventually strike it big.
Well, let me ask you this, Geoff. I've had theories, but I've never known for sure.
Yeah.
If he was using, and to what degree that may have affected this fall off.
So basically, he moved into my place, I think in November, maybe the beginning of it.
Right.
Something like that. he was always pushing like that he was bigger than he was. Like, and it was like he knew that it wasn't legit. At a certain point, when he started getting the entourage, it flipped where I think he actually believed that he was bigger than he was. Where it was no longer him sowing this like half lie, you know? And his drug addiction at that point, he wasn't doing hard stuff like everyone thought he was. People, I think you guys thought he was doing meth and stuff. He was shooting his Suboxone, and he was snorting Wellbutrin, and he was doing a lot of coffee.
Right.
And that's what I think really what did it was he wasn't sleeping. So the complete lack of sleep. I mean, I don't remember ever seeing him sleep. And the longer he stayed up, the more insane that he got.
Right. I think there's no question about that. And I think that a lot of it goes with the psychosis that he apparently was going through. What I picked up a little bit more than what you just shared, but I agree he was not doing the really bad stuff.
Right.
But he was doing these high energy drinks
Smoking
like Red
weed,
Bull, smoking weed constantly,
doing a lot of caffeine. Like
right, doing an enormous amount of caffeine and
Right.
just all sorts of energy drinks and
Right.
so forth. And he was so revved up trying to get everything done
Right.
and then you take that stuff.
Well, he started believing that he'd be able to avoid going to prison if he got big enough, and if he could make a big enough noise out in the streets, the prison reform and everything like that.
You know, another thing I know he was taking at that time was off the street. He was taking Xanax. And
That was at the very like right around where you started, like in mid-November.
right. That's when he started
that's when
taking
he
the
started
Xanax.
the Xanax.
And what I found out, and there's people watching this, I'm sure that know more than I do, but what I found out was that excessive use of Xanax can really lead to psychosis. So that was my thinking, is that he was taking the Xanax, he was taking all the other stimulants. Therefore, his insomnia, which was already bad, became
Right.
completely out of control, and therefore it spirals. The more it gets out of control, the more he had to take stuff to stay awake.
Right.
And the more he takes stuff to stay awake, the more he couldn't go to sleep.
Right.
So he was just having a terrible period like that. But it was quite a 2-week period that you and I both went through.
It was insane. Yeah.
Putting it mildly. I mean, it was very, very, very frightening. He shot a video of himself walking down, is it Carrillo, that's right around the corner from you, just walking down that street and basically talking about that there was a conspiracy of, federal law enforcement that was that was after him.
Right. I mean, he did a Facebook Live talking to the FBI.
That's right.
Right on the front porch.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. I remember that as well. Well, what other stories? You have another favorite or two up your sleeve about your many years hanging out with Ryan?
I mean, it's hard to say because it was always like that. I don't know. Pick a time period.
Well, I mean, the key time period was, you saw some of you started you were still hanging out with him after he got out. He went back to prison, of course, December 1st of 2017. Got out at the end of March, and so March of 2018.
Right.
And then he wasn't incarcerated anymore after that, thank God. But so during that period, after he got out again, what do you anything changed, anything different?
For a while there, he was pretty stabilized. He stopped doing the hard drugs, at least at first, and he was stabilized on Suboxone and smoking weed.
Right.
And so he was doing that, and that was around the time where I'd been encouraging him to start this YouTube thing back in 2014. Something like that, because he was always telling his stories, and I was like, why don't we just record this, and it can bolster your book career. So he didn't take my suggestion until years later, right after he got out the last term. But it was pretty cool seeing everything come together.
When you think back of Ryan, to your times with Ryan, what did you like most about him? What was his best traits? What if you thought of Ryan Leone in the best possible light, what would that be?
It's a dichotomy because he was honest and he also wasn't, right? But I think his utter honesty with all of his faults at least in my life, it allowed me to become more honest with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, things that most people wouldn't want to talk about. I mean, he's telling it on YouTube to the world.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. He. I mean, I would agree with that. I think that he was a very sweet, honest person. I mean, he was always certainly that way to his parents, to me and Diane. But yet, on the other hand, there was a certain con man attitude that he had in there as well. But I think a lot of that, he was just so clever. Just a clever guy. He was just very shrewd and clever. So that way. So having said that, on the other side of the coin,
he was honest unless he was promising something. Mm-hmm. That's what I learned from Ryan.
Yeah, and I even think a lot of the promises were from his heart.
He meant it, but
it was just unrealistic.
When he'd forget about it,
Right. He would say, "Hey, Ryan, you promised me $100,000 if I do this. Where is it?"
Right.
So I can understand that. Flip on the other side. What do you think? I mean, it ultimately came to a tragic end for all of us that loved him. What traits do you think may have sort of expedited his fall from grace? What are the major reasons to you that Ryan's life was so tragic?
I think that one of the biggest things is he could never slow down. Like my biggest thing with Ryan, because in my personal life, I've taken spirituality wholeheartedly, and I was one thing that I always tried to kind of rub off on him, but it was one thing that he never really took serious. Mm-hmm. Meditation and learning to focus more, that was something that he just never developed.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, he was he was very much aware of that. I think a good piece of that also had to do with a certain PTSD that inevitably comes out of being incarcerated for 8 years, which was the total amount of time that Ryan spent at various levels of incarceration, which was utterly tragic for somebody whose worst crime was nonviolent drug offenses. It's a society gone mad when you can't treat a disease like a disease and treat it as a criminal act. So I think that inevitably somebody who's basically a gentle person and not a hard, mean person, came from a family that was certainly a very loving, positive family, and Geoff knows our family, that PTSD was inevitable. And I think that really colored a lot of his activities after he got out of his various stints of incarceration. And I think he was a man in a hurry, that he had spent all these years, while everybody else was getting ahead in life, were basically lost years. So I think to some extent he was a man in a hurry, and that made him that much more hyper and anxious to go out there and close the deal of success much sooner than most of us would do. So I want to ask you a question, Geoff. You told me earlier that you're as clean as can be right now, and that's wonderful news. But I know that you've had your challenges over the years as well.
Right.
There's presumably people out there that are watching this or will ultimately be watching it that are dealing with issues themselves and are maybe in long-term recovery. But tell us a little bit about what got you out of the abscess. What brought you back? Why are you sober today after flirting with significant addiction issues for many, many years?
Right. I mean, coming from being in addiction with Ryan to being completely sober, for me, it's taken some years to finally get to where I'm completely abstinent and off of everything, and I'm happy. And I've been going through some tough times, but I don't need anything to get me through it anymore. And really, it's spirituality. Whatever pathway it is, not religion for me, but just the core and essence of all religion. Meditation, surrender, and then there's the other aspects of physical fitness and eating right. I mean, it's the mind, body, spirit thing. So it's like taking all areas of health and converging it into one. So for me, it took years to finally get to where I'm at. I mean, I got off heroin completely, I want to say in 2015. And then I was on Suboxone for some years. And then I finally came off of that right before the pandemic in 2020. And I was still smoking weed. And it's been stages, at least in my life. I mean, I haven't had a drink since about 2016 either. So, you know, it's been stages in my recovery. And it's not this all or nothing thing. Like, it used to be that way for me. It would be like back in the day, I'd be using heroin, I'd get into a program, smoke weed, say, fuck it, I'm just going to start shooting dope again. And it's been allowing myself to grow through every stage, as opposed to having this black and white thinking. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's been like for me, you know.
Well, I think you really hit on a good point. I didn't know what your answer was going to be, but I couldn't agree with it more. That I think ultimately, with almost anything, with almost any addiction or any habit that you want to change, it's more of an issue of lifestyle,
right?
Rather than specific interventions.
Right.
It's a much broader intervention.
An intention too, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I went from taking Suboxone, for instance, and abusing it, to then using it as a medication. And also with the marijuana, I would smoke that as an intention to get high, and then I'd flip it to using it as a medication. Mm-hmm. And when the medication no longer served its usefulness, I mean, I no longer need it anymore. So, I mean, that's been my pathway.
Geoff, if by some miracle you could speak to Ryan right now for 30 seconds, what would you say to him?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, you know, at first I would tell him, like, I'm a father now. So that was one thing I never got a chance to share with him. You know, it was the day he died, because we had a falling out back in, I want to say, the end of 2020. And that had to do with the fact that he started using again. And, like, I couldn't be a part of that. I was fully backing off of everything, and I saw where things were headed.
Right.
And so we kind of had our little falling out. And I was about to actually, the day he died, I was talking with my now ex-fiance, and I was like, yeah, I want to contact him and let him know that I'm going to be a father. Because we had some words. And
that very day. Wow. Explain that day, if you would. How did you find out, and how did it affect you?
I mean, it affected me big time. And, you know, in a weird way, I knew it was coming. My personal experience spiritually was very interesting. You know, I saw the Soft White Underbelly interview that he did down in LA. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that, I was like, I don't think he's going to be around much longer. And I had told my girlfriend that, or my fiance at the time. And I want to say it was his last show that he did here with Mickey Avalon. I don't know what the date was, but mm-hmm. the day that it happened, I actually had gone to a near-death experience study group that was held at the Unity Church. And I remember being in there, and they did a guided meditation at that point. They're like, we want you to do one and think of someone you love, that you're guiding them into their passing. Mm-hmm. And at first, I picked my dad. But right when it started, Ryan popped into my mind. So I did this whole meditation guiding Ryan into death. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I remember it came to me, I was like, I told the week before he died, I was like, I don't think he's going to be around much longer. I think he's going to die. And literally, like, my fiance's mom died on the 27th. So 5 days later, mm-hmm. he died, and then I found out the 3rd.
How'd you find out?
I found out Jesse.
Olsen?
No, Jesse DeFlippo.
DeFlippo, okay.
Yeah.
He knew a bunch of Jessies.
Yeah, he called me and he's like, do you know? And I was like, no what? And he's like, Ryan. And I was like, no.
Did that...
I mean, I fell apart. I completely collapsed. And I mean, I was sobbing. Like, I was unresponsive for like at least 10 days.
And since then, I mean, it's been, 8 months now, 8 or 9 months. Has it changed? Did that have any effect on your life?
Yeah, I mean, at that time I was still smoking weed, and I mean, at that point I was like, you know what, like, I'm done with all of it. Like, I mean, that was enough for me to be like, if he couldn't get sober, I'm like, I'm just going to get completely off of everything to honor his life, you know?
Yeah. One last question, Geoff. Basically telling the people out there that are watching this and understanding that they could run the full gamut from people that are in heavy addiction to people that are in recovery to people that have never touched drugs in the first place. What would you want to tell them about life in general? You know, this is your chance to just let people know that this is something you've learned in your 37 or so years on this planet. You know, what do you want to share with them?
Life is precious. You know, we don't know how long we have no idea how long we have. You can leave in an instant, and we will. And so, to treat every day the best we can, to be kind and loving towards everyone. I mean, there's things that I wish I could have taken back that I said to Ryan, but I can't. You know, and I never got that chance. And so that's the kind of thing. Like, you never know. You never know when your time is up, or when your best friend or family member. So to treat every day precious.
Well, there were certainly long periods of Ryan's life where you were one of the most important people in his life. So, you know, I'm as emotional sitting here talking to you now as I've been, you know, at any point since he passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very emotional for me to, you know, you're here, a piece of Ryan still sitting next to me when you're here. So it's been a very emotional interview, and thank you so much for doing it. And maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be nice.
Well, anyhow, thank you, Geoff, and thank you all of you that are following Ryan's Patreon channel, and hopefully we can bring you a lot of good insights and information in the future. Any ideas you have, let Karina know, or I guess on Patreon you can do comments, and it will get back to me. And anything we can do to make this even more interesting and enjoyable for everybody, we want to go that route. So, Geoff DeRose, thank you very much. Okay.